your stuff. Actually, this should be submitted as JSON file. So I don't know why you submit me this. Then even the file name also wrong. I don't know what's this. Not JPEG, not, yeah. All right. So sometimes you got to imagine if there's more users. This is just one user, pretty simple. All right, so in our assignment one, we're going to have multi-users environment. Yes, please. So always read the brief. Same for Jordan's team. So this should be able to expand. So probably you could have something called users, then have multiple objects, multiple users in that users. All right. Waveform stream, this is fine, but only this I have an issue. It's blank, so it's like, hey, what's this? And sometimes you have health too. I'm not sure. I think you are trying to break out into different users or characters. So probably that should have one more node on top. So it should be able to have multiple users, right? Or players or characters. Because in our database, we're going to have that, right? And let me just go to our classrooms. Shift things around. And so not everyone has submitted this week's work. So there's a couple of you missing. All right, and not only that, some haven't even gone into Google Classroom before. So Sunny and Divesh, all right. The CAs are pretty important. I would say it helps you out a lot. Okay. Oh, yeah. Another thing is I have put a folder instead of multiple materials. All right, so that's easier, I guess. So your folder would have something like this. All right. I'll putting in some source codes as we go along. Okay. And we're going to check everyone's Firebase setup is all right. If okay, emote. If not okay, emote here. All right. So I need to know whether your Firebase is working. Then I know who to help or who to look at. Can you all please emote? As long as you can write to the database, that means your Unity setup is at least fine. Yeah. So that's my biggest concern, because going on, we're going to touch a lot of that. All right, but what haven't set up?
Not just like what you mean.
Oh, like you need to do the CA law, then you can at least write to database and all that. So your Unity should be able to write to Firebase database. So that's what I meant by your setup is okay. Yeah. Then how come never come find me? What about the rest? So I have 9. About Divesh here. Sunny with issues. So Leon, I suggest you go and try. All right. If not, it's going to be a problem. So the previous 2 classes, we will sort it out. All right. Then there's issues in the setup we see. So sometimes it's common
Alright, so you can see this is the
setup
green
problems.
sphere that Leon
You never install the JSON file properly, or you never install the SDK or things like that, because from now onwards, we always will need to work with the Firebase database, and the same for your assignment. All right. So I only have 8. I'm not sure who's left. So Divesh, about Joshua. What about Sanyu? And who else? All right. If not, it's going to be very hard on you guys. Okay. So I'll do a recap about last week. So we were setting up our Firebase. We worked with some JSON, get you used to the syntax with JSON, and we started working with Firebase. All right. So write simple data to your Firebase account. So a recap on our JSON utility. This is a Unity-based JSON converter. So there's all right, so it allows you to convert to JSON, and from JSON, so you can play around with your objects in Unity, and we can send JSON data back to our Firebase database. The important thing that I want to take you guys to take note is to set your always set your class or your object fields that you want to send to Firebase as public. Right, so it should be public string, public integer, things like that. So later I'll touch more on that. The other thing to take note is, so we'll do this week is about your JSON tree and how we should structure it, how we should query data, and some CRUD functions. So create, read, update, and delete. All right, and authentication with Firebase. So aside from doing interacting with our real-time database, we are also going to interact with the authentication service of Firebase itself. All right. So in Firebase, there's a couple of different services. So far, you guys have been using real-time database. We are going to use authentication pretty soon already today. All right. So that's why your setup needs to be good. If not, you can't work on any of this. So our JSON tree, and let me just present this. I'll just do some recordings. All right. Pause for a while. One starts. Okay. So this is something pretty important that I want to talk about. Always make sure that you have your public classes keep it clean, right? As clean as possible. Clean meaning there's no game logic, or there's no major processing, interaction with your UI and things like that. So your classes should be, like a blueprint of your data. That's all. And this is very important. So you should always set public accessor methods if you want the field to be stored into your database, because when you are converting to JSON, when you create the object itself, all right, they will look at which one are the public properties. They will only touch those. If it's private, they won't touch it. All right. Then always have constructors to help you. Okay. Constructors like this. The other thing to take note, I noticed some students, right? They like to use lowercase for the class names. All right, so make sure it is how do I say, capital letters for the first letter. All right, these help us to denote that this is a class, and this file should be the same as your file name itself. Okay. The other thing is you should have constructors to help you. Usually, you can have an empty one, then we can initialize the values one by one, something like this. This is empty constructor. right? Or you can have a constructor with parameters so they can fill in the params when you need. Okay. So please take note. The other thing to note is in JSON itself, right? Objects and arrays are differentiated by the design itself. So in objects, we could have braces. That helps us to know that it's an object and it's having a name value pair. There's a property and then there's a value attached to it. All right. The other one is in arrays. Arrays is like your normal arrays you use in C# and programming languages. So it's denoted by your square brackets, and we separate our values with commas. All right. We can combine both of them together, so we can have a very much extended version of our JSON data. Okay. If at any point of time you're not sure or I'm going too fast, let me know. All right. So these are some of the submissions in the classes. All right, so one of it is something like this. This looks pretty all right, except the syntax is a bit wrong, right? So we should have commas to separate our objects. So this is one object, one enemy object, levels, and things like that, right? There are characters over here, right? And then it gets a little bit messy. So let me just fire this up. Right, so things like this, so there's errors flagging out. So always check your JSON or your proposed JSON in an editor checker online. So when you are doing your assignment, make sure that you design the database first, test out whether your structure is correct with some fake data. And then you can start coding. Try not to do the coding first, right? So determine your data on how you want to structure it. So you see there's an array of objects. This is an array of objects, so we can denote, separate them out. So you can, what I meant earlier when I was talking about your team submission is, one is you can have levels that can determine all the different levels like this. All right, you have one level that's like this, one level like this, and so on. And you can have characters, so all the different characters that come in, right? So one object, right? Objects are denoted by the curly braces, right? So there's an issue here whereby you add one extra comma. So we take it out, make it nicer. So this team had a lot of these issues. All right, so they didn't end up nicely. Okay. And when I convert it to a tree, right, so it's something like this. So you can see from here, we have an array of characters. The first array is denoted by 0, and this is an object with 3 different property values. All right, so this editor helps a lot in helping us to plan a little bit, helping us to see how deep our tree is. All right, so you should be doing that in your assignment. Another one is usage of slashes with something like this. So try not to do that, it gets a little bit confusing. Right? And when I receive this JSON, it's a little bit wrong in some sense. Usually, like potions, we might, what are the potions, weapons, what are the weapons, and so on. So there seems to be like missing values that we should have. All this seems like only the properties. So we shouldn't have something like this unless maybe you want to use all this as your menu items. What's in the menu, what makes up a character, then maybe that's fine. So depending on your usage. All right. Then another one is about JSON practices. So having spaces like this isn't so good. We should keep it as tight as possible. So taking out those spaces helps a lot. We have JSON data like this. So this student team was doing ranking, one object, and so on and so on, right? So they put rank 5 and so on. But then this seems like a a property, right? Like a key lah, your identifier. So doesn't seem so okay. So maybe we can always sort the data, right? We can always sort the data, unless you really want this as your fixed naming convention, right? The reason is because when we navigate using Firebase, right? Our code is something like this. Reference. It could be, so it's something like this. All right, and maybe I want to get the value out. Okay, so it's something like this. We want our path. So the pathing is going to map accordingly, right? Who's the parent node, who's the char, and so on. All right, so that's how we retrieve values. So if you are having something like this, right, it's a little bit tricky. So I'm not sure how you want to do it, right? So just be careful on it. The other thing is about having numerical values. Numerical values like this, try to keep it as numeric as possible. Try not to use strings. All right, we can also have true, false values. This is great. This team was using true and false states to quickly determine what is the player states. All right, instead of having all the things as an array, this helps us to better identify all the different values that we need. All right. So some other best practice, just make sure that your property names are in camel case. That's the best. All right. I mean, they're all okay. There's nothing majorly wrong, but it's more like best practice because imagine you forget one dash. You are using dash all the way, and somehow you forget one dash. Right, then that's going to mess you up when you are trying to path your way. If you have an underscore, same thing, right? You have all lowercase, then sometimes you have an uppercase, so that's another issue. So camel case is one of the best ways that we can separate our way of doing. Okay. Some other values that we can store in JSON is now numerical values like I mentioned, true, false, strings, and we can have objects and our arrays. Okay, so all these are pretty common already. So you guys dealt with quite a couple of all these already. Right, so simply put it, our JSON data is based on a property or a key, right? So some people call it as a key, some people call it a property, and then we are separated by a value, so it has a value outcome. All right, it should be as meaningful as possible. We've defined semantics, meaning you should have a property that makes sense. The naming makes sense, is so-called readable. All right, it should be as camel case as possible. The thing is, it must have a letter, underscore, or $sign, right, for the property value naming. So the easiest way is always check with a JSON editor online. Okay. So next, I'm going to talk about how we can actually work with JSON data and mapping it to our classes. So classes are very important when we are dealing with database. That helps us to simplify a lot of things. It also helps us in creation of our applications. All right. So I have a simple game player class here. I have all my public strings that I want to manipulate. Then I have empty constructor and our constructor here. All right. So this is our blueprint of a game player. So when I map to our players over here, right? So I'm just always inserting nodes into our players. this is my root node. This is my root instance. So when you're coding, right, in the start when you initialize Firebase, it says root instance. This is the root itself. All right, this thing is our root. Then we can decide which path do we want to start. So I start at players, and I start inserting objects of game players. All right, and this is mapped accordingly. If you notice, this is sorted already, right? It doesn't map according to what you have here. Instead, this is sorted alphabetically, all right, A to Z. So this is different from how you determine in your class itself. Okay. So I'm saying players. Okay, yeah. So I push my data to players. So I reference my database, right? And I say char players. I'm going to start at this player's path. All right. Then I push generate a key for us. So this is a unique key that will be generated. So I put in a unique key. Then I put in my raw JSON data. Right, so I'm going to start explaining how does the code work. So this is my player weapon manager. So this is my mono behavior. I will attach this script to empty object in Unity. Right, I have my database reference. This is Firebase, right? And I reference it right at the start, use it at the awake. So at the start of the application, I will try and make a connection to my database. Once I make a connection, all right, so I say root reference. That means I have this as the root. All right. Then I start creating some fake weapons. My weapons are using a list, right? So I add a list, and then I start creating my player, right? So my player is, is a function within this class itself. So this is one big class. This entire thing is one big class. I key in my fields that I want, right? So just referencing it off here. These are all default values. That means I can set a default if no one keys in the value. So you see here, I only have 3, right? But there's a lot here, but it doesn't matter because all these are default values, right? Of course, you can key in and then it will overwrite the default values. Then I create my game player object, right? So earlier we have our game player class like this. Then I create my game player object, right? Once I'm happy, then I convert to JSON and then submit to our Firebase database. Anyone with questions at this point? No questions? All right, so I'm just explaining how our structure is. So root, this is our root, and then we have acquire players, acquire scores. So these are different chars that I have. All of them are all children of the root. All right, I have players. Then I have my player A or player B, whichever it is. All right. Then I could have health. I have all the different properties that's inside, and the tree goes deeper and deeper and deeper. All right. So there's a saying that we shouldn't plan too deep. We should make it as flat as possible when possible. It's okay to duplicate your data when you need to. All right. So we're going to talk about how to structure your database, especially in your assignment. So this comes back into play. So we have our players. Right, so imagine an MMO, we have a basic profile to store. We also have weapon inventory. So we have a lot of things to store, right? So a typical player profile is something like this. And I have player name as my key identifier. Right? I have my player's full name or something like this. I could have weapons that he has, and just using true false values. So all I would do is, when I check, I just need to check whether is it true or is it false. If it's true, then I path to my weapons field. All right, I could have one more here that says about weapons and what does the weapon do. So I want to get weapons properties. So instead of saying all the weapons, weapons properties inside the weapons here, right, under the players, I will just say that he has the weapon itself. All right. So when I talk about some other things, this is a bad practice to have when we have JSON data. So imagine we have a chat system, like your WhatsApp. So we probably have a chat parent. Right? We have key identifier like which chat group it is. That means the chat ID. All right. We could have a chat message title. All right. And then we have messages, lots of messages. So who sent that message? What's the message? What is the message? Right? And so on. So this gets maybe very long. You could have 1,000 messages in each chat group. Right. So every time I want to retrieve a chat, right? There's a lot of data I want to retrieve at any time, right? And then I might not need everything. Okay. So this becomes an issue when it scales. So always imagine your data when it scales, like 100 users, 100 chats. Like 100 users having 100 chats each. What happens? So when I increase to 1,000 users, and then what happens? All right. So think about your data in that manner. And then the idea is to go as lean, as flat as possible. So these are different groups of data within one root instance, right? So within that root node itself, I have all this, right? So I have chats, I have members, I have messages. So maybe in the chats, I only store the chat ID, all right? I have my chat title and when was what is the last message, and the timestamp, and so on. So this just retrieves all the groups of chats. Okay. Then we have members. Members tells us, who are in the chat group, right? So in chat 1, right, I only have these people. If I want to find out what kind of users they are, I'll just have another reference. Who are the users, what are the user details, and so on. Right? I just need to know whether they exist or they don't exist. Right, so this is called indices. So that means all we do is just check whether it exists or not. Right, so this way of pathing is very fast. I don't retrieve unnecessary information. Then I have one more that checks for the messages and stores them. All right, so in messages, I have the message ID, what's the first message, and so on. All right, so it may seem like a little bit of a duplicate of data. All right, but in this way, we can streamline our data very fast. All right, that means we can go in and see which one is important to us. All right, just retrieve, and retrieve. All right, and we use a pathing mechanism. That means in chats, what's our key and title? So our key is here. Right, I use $sign here is just to say that this thing is changing, right? This is like identifier, so $signs help us to see that. All right, it's not like a key and a $sign, no. Okay, the next thing is about scaling your data. This is the same thing. So we have our users, this expands on the chats earlier. Our users, our user details, and which group are they in. All right. So the value doesn't matter. If I want to find out details about a group, I use this as a key. I go to my groups data and I find out details of it. So you can see that there's a duplication of data. Our users, our users, our groups, and our groups. So in a way, it's duplicated, but I'm trying to keep it as a clean structure as possible. I don't include unnecessary information. All right, so I don't include all the details about my groups. Instead, I segment it out, and then I put it here. The details of groups will be in the groups node itself. All these are little nodes. So you can say char and nodes, all right, that we can have. Okay, can pause here. Everyone okay so far? Are you still there? Yeah, I have some missing students already. Structuring as, yeah, it's much better when we start doing, then we can relook at structure. All right, so basically, if you see that there's a lot of information being stored, right, in one particular node. So imagine I have chats. So this is one good example. So I want to store member information here. How do I store this? Details about the sender, details about the chat groups, and so on, right? So imagine you store everything inside here, right? Then this thing increases over time, right? Your chat size increase, the number of groups increase, then there's a lot of information. So the moment I retrieve one node of chats, I retrieve a huge chunk of data, right? It's when you are doing your CA, your data is very small because you put very one or two sample data only. But when you multiply all those up, right, by 100 and 1,000, right, then you see that your information is a lot. Then imagine I retrieve just one part itself, and then there's a huge chunk of information, then that becomes an issue, right? So I would segment this out, title messages. I'll just take this whole chunk out. I'll keep my chats lean, right? Take it out and make one more over here. Okay, so something like this. Same with members. I want to get member details. Who's in the group? I take it out. Right, and users. Our user details. Right. So by taking them out, it will help you a lot in the long run. Right, I'm going to talk about CRUD. So what it means we want to do create, read, update, and delete in our, when we deal with C# and Unity. Okay, so there's a few things to take note. We have been doing, you have been doing continue with, all right. So we can use continue with on main thread. So in Firebase itself, when we when we deal with the database, C#, Unity and C# will just make a separate query while your game is running. So your game is running, blah blah blah, right? Then we are sending queries to our database, and then that will send things back. So it works like a callback, all right? Sometimes there's a conflict in your UI, and things like that. So instead of doing by default what it does, we want it to run together with our application. So we use continue with on main thread, and then we use our Firebase extensions to allow us to do that. So what it does, this code does is, we get our default instance, get reference, these are path, and we want to get our values, and then we carry out a task. This task, this is just a variable name, but so inside it's like a callback. So a callback means I send out a command and I wait for it to come back, right? So this task is sent, and once it's completed, I can, print out my results, right? If there's an error, I will handle that error. Okay, so later I'll show you the demo. Let me just fire up my Unity. Right, so this is my simple CRUD. I wanted to create, read, update, and delete. All right, so I have total number of players in the game is 3. Let me just create some data. All right, so inside I have a code to create players. All right, I can see who's the number of players in game is updated, and I want to retrieve details. Things I'll find you, and I want to retrieve your data. All right, and then information like this. Okay, so I go to the code. Let me just move along. And wait for my editor to start. So in your game, right, in your application, you can create users using authentication. Then you can create player details. All right, and we can also take note of their high scores and so on. All right, statistics about the player, when they last logged in and things like that. So give me a moment. All right. So let me just explain the code briefly. So this is my game player class. All right, I have all the details about the player itself. This is the blueprint of the object. Okay. Then these are constructors that have. These are just functions that I can use. One of it is saving to JSON, right? So I don't need to keep typing this all the time. So I just create a function inside the object itself. So I just do this. I also have one that prints out the player details. This is a string function. It returns a string. Same for here, JSON data is a string. So just return a string. So what this does, I just print nicely information. All right, print the information of the player nicely. All right, so next we're going to look at how we can find a player. Okay. So in the start, I import in all the libraries and directives. Of course, I have TextMesh Pro, Unity UI. I have my task and threading. This is for continue with on main thread usage. And I should, of course, have my Firebase. How to know whether your Firebase is working, your SDK is doing properly? This should be colored. So database reference should be colored. And then it should show Firebase database. Right, that means you're referencing it properly. All right. So the next thing is on my awake, I will start referencing my database. Right, so I can use like this root reference, or I can even get a reference to my path. Right, in this instance, I pre-assign my path. So ref players, just players here. So this string goes back to here. That's all. All right. So next, I'm going to find, when I click on retrieve, what happens. Later I go to create. So this is what happens when I retrieve information. Right, so I get my string of player to search for. This is from my input field. This is my text field. All right, I create a query. A query is the same as a reference, so it doesn't matter. Just put query so that it's more semantic. All right, this is also a way that Firebase use. All right, we can set a query and what our query. That means what is the command to go for. All right, so I set a player reference that is my database reference. Next, I have something called order by chart. So I want to sort all the information by player name first. So in your Firebase, let me just go back to Firebase a little bit. All right. In your Firebase, there's a lot of properties, right? And this is sorted alphabetically. All right. I want to sort by player name. So player name goes on top first. All right. So it goes here. So this is what I want Firebase to do. All right. And I want to find values equal to my player name. So this is my player name. So I have something called equal to. All right. The next thing, I want to limit the results. So limit tells us to, I just want the very first one to come back. So this is limit. All right. So once I'm happy, the next thing I throw out the task. I go ask Firebase. So this is my query, my search command. I get all the values, and I want to do it on the main thread itself. Then the task will go out and execute. Right? If it's there's an error or there's an exception, print out something or stop. Right? Once if I have no issues, I will retrieve out the database results. So I have something called data snapshot. So this takes a snapshot of the data that was retrieved. All right, and I get the results, task.results. That means the result of the data. All right, so if it exists, that means if there's data that's coming back, right, then I do something about it. Okay, so your data might come in many different snapshots inside, or many different charts. So what I do, I will create a loop. Right, so I'm just looping the information. Once I'm happy inside, I have something called I'm converting players information back to my object. All right, so this is JSON.unity from JSON. I'm converting from JSON. I want it to die to have my game player class type. All right, so it must follow the structure of the game player. And what kind of information I want to send back? I want to send back my JSON data. So with the JSON, from right to left, I convert it to a game player type of object. All right, and I will assign it to my player variable. Okay, and with that, I have my player that's retrieved from the database itself. Okay, in that instance, I can also have my unique key that I generated earlier. I can start printing my data. All right, so this is my text information, so I can just print my information out, and you're done. If it's not found, then I can complain, player not found. All right. Any questions? I'll go to create new player. So create new player, just repeating what I said earlier. All right, so I have my command called create new player, all the different fields that I have. This is my player object. All right, make sure you have the new class name. All right, so my class name is game player, then I put in all the different variables. All right. Then the next thing, I want the reference, where to put it. Do I want a unique key? Of course, you don't need to have a unique key. It's up to you. Right? You could have your own key if you want. Right? And then we save to our database. How do we save? We set the command set raw JSON to our database. Right? So in this instance, we have create and reading of information. All right. Everyone okay so far? Am I lagging? Let's send some lag. Rewatch the recording, and when you try out, it's much better. Yeah, don't worry too much for now. Yeah, let me just make my screen screen's a little bit faster. Hang on. Oh no. My Mac is lagging. Just give me one moment. Okay. So reading data, we have done it. Demo. The next thing I want to talk about is working with handlers. So with data writing, you can delete data and all that. So your Firebase is always updating, right? When your Firebase updates, you can always listen for it. That means if there's a change in data, I can work on my code. All right, that means if there's a change, I just listen, hey, my data changed somehow, I can execute something. I can create an event, I create something in real time in my game itself. All right, so these are all listeners waiting for things to happen. They subscribe to changes in data. So if there's a value change in the database, you can execute something. If there's a new nodes added, new char added, new items added, all right, I can also execute something. Same for change, removal, and move. All right. So it's something like this. I have my Firebase database instance. All right, and I add in a listener called value change. So earlier, I have my value change here, and then I set plus equals which function do I want to execute. All right. So whenever in leaders, as a change in data, I will execute this function. Okay, so this is my function. The function name doesn't matter, you can always change it, right? The key thing is this one. So what is this information that's being sent back, right? So your data is sent back also, your snapshot of the data. If there's a database error, highlight it. If not, let's process it. All right. So data snapshot means there's a snapshot of all the information, right? So they retrieve all the information back. So in long form, it's something like this on how we can do things. So we can retrieve, like say, the number of children in the database. So I can, in my arguments, so the snapshot itself, right? That means the entire chunk of information, this entire player's information will be sent back to me. I can count the number of children. That means how many child are there? 1, 2. All right. Then I update in my UI. So I can say total number of players in the game itself, is how many. That's all. All right. You'll get the idea. I'll show you the demo. Let me just swap to desktop. Let's go to our handlers. So the handlers we have all the 5 different handlers: value change, char added, and so on and so on. All right, and I repeat again, the function name is up to you to decide. This is just a function in the class itself. So let me just go to player change value. All right, so we could set it up. So value change event. All right, if there's an error, I will send an error. And then all we have to do, we can retrieve the snapshot now. So snapshot. Yes, it goes to snapshot. All right, so we can retrieve that snapshot of information. and I can count the number of children. I can do a lot of things. I can iterate all the data. Right, that means I can check and get the key. I can get the entire JSON value. That's entirely up to me. All right. Then I can do updates in my game. Maybe change the game mechanics. I can change. Maybe I have 10 more players in the game. Maybe there's a new high score or things like that. So up to you to decide how you want to display. Or maybe I change my user profile. I change my username, change my email. I can change. I can show it in my UI itself. All right. So this is pretty instantaneous. All right, and very fast because all our data is synced with our code itself. All right. So I can say there's a new chart added if I want. So that's up to you on how you want to work around how you plan your design. Right. So this part is quite cool in some sense. I always like to play around with all this. And let me just go back to my content. So we are done with handlers, and they are pretty useful. So you need a little bit of planning when you are creating your application. All right. So imagine handlers. So some students, why do we use them? We are just waiting for things to happen. So all these commands are waiting for things to happen. If that thing happens, then I do something about it. All right. So imagine in a game, there's new, I don't know, maybe you destroy an enemy, destroy 100 enemies. Then I can trigger a command, or I change my player profile. Then you can say, oh, data is safe and things like that. All right. So that's up to you on how you want to do it. So just going to repeat on writing. All right, how do we write or how do we update information? Right. So updating is pretty similar to writing. We just need to know what is our path that we want to map to, right? Path to save. So imagine when you go back to our tree, right? This is players dot this key, then dot current weapon. So this is our path. Instead of using dots, we use the slash. Right? What's the path that I want to go? All right. Then I have my reference. Then I start mapping. In long form, let me just go one by one. So if you want to do just a simple one, I can just update values. Right. Then if I want to do multiple different path updates, right? How do we do that? We can use a dictionary. All right, a dictionary, and this is mapping to a string. So those are our keys, right, and our object. Right, what kind of information do I want to update? So in this instance, my ID is dynamic, right? That means it changes. Right? I have my health that I want to map, so it's maybe first player ID 1/health. I'll change the health. I'll change the max health. I'll change the XP, and then maybe I'll do a loop, right? Because I want to play around with all the different IDs. In this instance, I'm using just one fixed ID. You could have maybe multiple variations, or maybe you could updating many different paths all at once, right? So once you collect all your paths and all your changes, all we have to do is we dump in the dictionary itself, right? So we place in our dictionary, and let's make it more obvious. All right. So we place our dictionary and we tell, I want to update my database. All I do is call my reference, right? This is our connection to Firebase, and I tell Firebase I want to update all its children, right? All the children of players that is in my dictionary itself. Okay, so and then you check, oh, which path do I want to update? Then I'll just update with that player information. Okay, so far, oh, you shouldn't say it's scary. It's not that scary. It's just a little bit of planning. That's the issue lah. All right, and a little bit of trying out. So let me just show you in code. update layer. Where was it? Yeah. So for me, I just do a simple update. I just want to find, what's my player name. I find what's the player key. All right, and then I create my reference. That means my path. I can use .char. This is my path. That's also okay. Or I can use .reference to map to my path. Right. Then I set my values. All right. Setting values means we are overwriting that particular value that I want. All right. So it's very similar to write. I can use update also. That's also okay. So update children async. All right. And the last thing that I want to talk about is about deleting. So in deleting, we use remove value async. All right. So how do we find? Same thing. We can find the path, or we can search, order, and filter the values. All right. So order by char sorts is a sorting command. Right, order by char is a sorting command. Equal to is a filtering command. All right, so just filters. All right, then we get the reference and then we remove the value. Okay. Let's pause here for a while. Right. Need to remember, yeah. That's why I need to try, and that's why you need your Firebase setup to be done proper. All right, so Leon, you really got to get it done. All right, if there's issue, then let me know.
Lecture, is it what happens like if Unity can see that it's working, but on Firebase it doesn't update it?
That means your setup wrong. Something went wrong.
Okay.
Later we try. So you think your code is correct lah? You think your Firebase is that side is correct lah?
I think so.
Okay. Later we see. So our simple CA, right, is to create a CRUD system. That's all. All right. So trying to get used to it, because in our assignment we're going to have that into our requirements. All right. So you just need to export the Unity package, scene, scripts, and any related files. Please don't export your Firebase SDK that's inside all the unrelated packages. All right. Any questions before I pause for a while for a small break? Watch the recording. I don't give the script yet. So all the scripts are inside already. Yeah, all the commands are here already. So I want you to try first. Yeah. Okay. If not, you're gonna have issues. Okay, I'll pause here for a break. Now it's 10:05. We come back at 10:15. Then we touch about authentication. Authentication, I would like you guys to try it out as soon as possible. All right. Let me just stop the recording. Any other questions? we have a lot of empty objects, and we probably call it manager, game manager, Firebase manager, alt manager, and so on. All right, so then we have a lot of things. One of it is probably I'll just use my form manager. All right, then we have things like this. So how do we make things like this appear? All we have to do is let's go to our code and go to form manager. Right, so this is my class. All right, my form manager, I have my mono behavior. Let me just record this. All right, I have my mono behavior. So make sure you have whichever UI fields that you want to call or you want to be placed. So I have my public inputs and so on, simple buttons, right? So how do I reference? All I have to do is drag and drop on the fields that I want, and this will be linked. So this button will be linked to this variable and so on, right? I can use code, but I can also use this. All right, so that's up to you on how you want to do it. Right, I prefer using this. It's much easier and faster. All right, it's not dynamically generated, so I don't need to bother. So in this way, it's much faster. So in my code, in my manager class itself, I can always call that button, what I want it to do. Okay, then I can say these are all email text fields, all my password fields. I can retrieve all that data from whichever UI that I have. All right, so that's one of the easiest ways to start. Then you might ask, how do I handle buttons? All right, so how do I handle buttons? I can use these on-click event handlers. All right, either you use code or you can use the inspector to help you. All right, use inspector because much faster and easier. I just add my reference to the object that I want. So make sure I have my form manager. Right, so in my form manager, I have a lot of different functions. All right, so basically, whichever object that I want to reference, I can execute its function inside. So by referencing this particular object, I have access to the functions that are in the object itself. So in the form manager, I have my class, my script, right? So in that script, I have many different functions. Then I select whichever function that I want, and that's about it. All right, so that's how we can do linkage of UI and code. Okay. So checking in. Are you guys here? These emotes, because we're going to do authentication, and this part is very important. All right, by doing this, we can actually, doing this authentication CA, we can do a small part of our assignment already. All right, so this CA is going to help you in your assignment. So 9, okay. All right, so I'm going to start about authentication next. So how do we start authentication in Firebase? Mine has already started. So in your version, right, just go to Firebase, you click on authentication, and then you click on get started. All right, so mine has already been started, so you can follow along. If I'm too fast, just slow me down. All right, so just go to Firebase, click on authentication. All right, so you should be able to create something. All right, get started. Then click on sign in method, should be email and password. This is our sign in method. All right. And once you click on that, you enable email and password, and then you click on save. That's all. The next thing that we need to do, remember your Unity, your Firebase SDKs, import the package into your project. So it should be .NET 4, Firebase Alt. Unity package. All right. Once you're done and happy, we have to download our JSON Google Services JSON file again. All right. So how do we do that? We go to our project overview, project settings, right? Download this. Delete the one in your Unity project. Okay. So I just want to check, is anyone following along? If not, I will continue. Yeah, following along, I will just pause a while. Is anyone following along?
Cher, import which one?
Sorry?
Which one? Import which one?
Import Firebase auth.
The one on .NET 4.
Yes, we only use .NET 4. Do not use .NET 3. All right.
The Firebase authentication one, right? Or
Yes. Okay, let me just check. Is anyone following along? Remote. Listening only. Remote. So that I can adjust my pace. So to let's see, Esther. Esther, your side all right? You're able to import and start Firebase out.
Importing.
Okay. So make sure you download the JSON file again. Okay, I just talk about authentication and what is it like in Firebase. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting spam. So when I create users in Firebase itself, I can actually create straight from the administrator. This is the authentication administration, right? All it needs when you're creating is an email and a password. If you type in nonsense, they will reject you straight away. All right, so it has to be a valid email. Even something like this, you attempt to be valid, so try to be as valid as possible. Right, you can set your password if you want, and then you can add the user straight away. When you are having a user, you can have many different authentication providers. So you can sign in with Google, sign in with GitHub, and so on. But in this instance, we're going to use email first. All right. In our authentication, we can reset a password. This is our admin. We can reset password. In the code itself, we can also do that. All right. So we can send a password reset, and then we can even make a email template. Right, so the moment I say send, email will be sent out that says, you need to reset your password and so on and so on. All right. So you can see how does the email look like. We can actually modify how our email looks like also. All right. So you can actually modify all this created to your design and so on and so on. All right. So that's up to you to decide. Okay. And of course, we can disable the account, delete the account. The other thing that I want to mention is this unique user ID that's generated. This is totally unique, and we can actually use it into our database. So these are all separate features. They are not linked in any way. Authentication is authentication. So I can have authentication, and then I have a user ID that's generated. So imagine your user is created, I have this user ID, I can straight away go to my real-time DB, right? When I create my player, I can assign that user ID to my player itself, all right? So instead of maybe using the generated key, I can actually use the key, the ID that authentication provides. All right, so that's up to you. I prefer to use that in some sense. All right. We're going to do authentication. All right, let me just show you briefly how does the code work, how to set it up. Okay, so authentication is very, very straightforward. It's even more straightforward than CRUD and working with Firebase DB. The first thing we need to do is we need to use Firebase, the auth. This is from your library. Earlier they import from the SDK. All right. Then you make a reference, Firebase auth, right? Get the instance that I have. So we only have one instance of authentication in our service. The next thing, this is like your database reference. This is my authentication reference, right? So how do I create my user? So imagine the moment I click on my button, I can start creating my user. So I can say auth.create user with email and password async. All right. Then I send in my email and password, and then I send out my task. So you notice this kind of commands, similar commands keep repeating when we deal with Firebase, because that's how it works. Firebase will operate, carry out a task that you send it, then you do something about it, then send some information back and things like that. All right. So I send out a task, and then I check whether is it okay. If it's okay, then I do something when my task is completed, and that's about it. And your user is created already. All right. Of course, in Firebase, it will complain. It will send a complaint back if your password is not at least 6 characters. If your email is wrong, it's not a valid email, it will complain. All right. So prior to sending that information, we need to do some validation. All right. Validation means we need to check whether the data that we are sending, the email password we are sending, is it all right? Okay, and I'll just show you a demo about how we can do it. So earlier, where was I? Yeah, so auth manager, authentication manager, yeah. So this is my authentication manager. I use Firebase, I use authenticate, right? I made a reference to my Firebase, right? I started in my awake. Right? Usually we use manager is just to handle logic for that matters. All right, so this is just handling entirely authentication. All right, that means all the logic related to authentication commands. So I'm just going to skip to signing up a user. All right, same like the code sample that I gave earlier. This just takes in an email and a password, and then I will create my user. All right, so when the task is completed, that means when the query is sent properly, I can create my user straight away. All right, the user is automatically signed in the instance. Okay, then in my form manager, let me just shift. Oh no, just close it. In my form manager, this handles all the UI content. I have input field. These are all basic inputs and buttons, not Text Mesh Pro. All right, I can do my sign up over here. All right, so the moment I click on sign up, I will go and send. I go and use checkout, sign up new user. Why is it called auth manager and so on? So how do we do that in Unity? Let me just show you. It's same on how we can handle scripts. So in my form manager in Unity, this is my empty object. I attach my form manager script. So let me just show you. All right. So I'm mapping all these inputs one by one. I'm mapping my buttons. Button. I never map my login manager. Login button. I map a auth manager. This is my auth manager, right? Then I will attach my auth manager script. So by attaching a empty object with that script, I have access to my auth manager functions. So you see auth manager dot sign up new user. This on sign up is an event handler. All right, so let me just go to my button. So imagine all the buttons are mapped, all the inputs are mapped already. So on runtime, all right, I can click on that button and this will trigger my function. So this will trigger this function here. All right, so the moment I click on a button, I will trigger this function. Then my auth manager will do something about it. All right, so that's how we can link our information together. Okay. So this is our second CA. This is for authentication. So in your assignment, we will have a sign up, sign out, sign up login features. You can add additional like reset passwords and so on. Changing of profiles, details also can, right? But the basic that we need, right, is at least a way to sign up. All right, because when we sign up, then with that user, then we can start making unique player profiles in our game itself. All right, then we can have our leaderboard and all that already. Right, all that we'll do next week. So we do step by step. All right. Everyone okay so far? So other things that we can do, send reset emails, we can log out, we can log in, we can change our email verification, email itself, email password, we can change. We can handle any form of authentications, all right? We can make use of the unique user ID in authentication. We can check for unique usernames, that we link up with in our users. All right, we can have multiple sign-in. So let me just go back to, where was I? Firebase. All right, so we can do quite a lot of things with our users. So you can set some settings. Just leave it as default lah. So we can change our templates with one. Right. You can monitor their usage. How many people are coming in. All right. So authentication is one of the slightly easier things to do. Okay. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions at this point? We'll be doing more parts of authentication next week alongside with our game. All right. So I just want you to get used to authenticating, get used to creating, update, read, and deleting information. All right. The game that we do is a simple game. You can decide on what simple game that you want, or you can use the thing that we'll be doing. All right. I'll just show you what the game will look like. Let's make smaller. So our simple game will look something like this, and it's going to play. So I just click on them. Oh, I'm too fast. So I click on the skull, I'll get minus points. I click on something, I'll get some points. Of course, you can add audio, you can change the UI, the interface, you can use any models that you want. You can make your own FX, of course, put in some audio, and then set a timer, right? Maybe I'll set a mode whereby the game ends, for example, depending on what you want to do with the game mechanics. So that's entirely up to you. All right. Okay. Just pause, stop the recording. All right, Esther, are you all right? The rest all right? Roughly understand the flow, because this will be our CA2. Simple odd with email and password. This is the best time to start upgrading your UI already, so you can start thinking about your game. Either you make your own, or you can use the one that we'll be doing in class. All right. You can use your old games that you made in i3E, whichever, that's fine also. As long as there's a way to sign up, there's a way to log in, there's a way to keep track of information, all right, some player stats, and there's a way for a leaderboard to happen. All right, so these are some of the things that's the core of the assignment 1. Okay. Let's hang on, this plane flying by. All right. Okay, so the next part, I just want to check everyone can access this shared folder of materials in your Google Classroom. There's a link. Just want to ensure that everyone can access. Make sure that you're using your school account. Okay. Thanks, Esther. Very good. So I'll be using there, and at the same time the GitHub that we share with ITD. All right. So next part, I'm going to talk about the assignment, and I'll just record this. Thanks, Yishan. Yes, inside is also the learning materials and so on. So you have access to something like this. Correct? Leon, you get it? Thanks, John.
Yeah, sure.
Don't scare me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the brief. So I only released the brief today, your class. All right, so to make it fair. And I'm just going to record so the other 2 classes can listen. Okay. So, wait, is it recording? Yeah, I think it's recording already. So in our assignment 1 for DDA, we're going to do a couple of things inside, and it's a code along exercise. So make sure you do up your CAs properly. That's going to help you in the assignment. So some of the key requirements, we are using our cloud platform Firebase to help integrate with our game engine. We're going to work with authentication services. We are also going to design your appropriate data schemas. That means how you model your data, how you structure the data, and what kind of data do you want to store in your application. All right. And this is something called transact data. That means we are either creating, reading, or updating or deleting information on our Firebase database. Right. This is an individual assignment. This is 20% of the entire module. In the process of doing the project, you should think about, what kind of data do you want to store? What kind of interesting information do I want to display? Is the onboarding process smooth? That means after I sign up, what I'm supposed to see? Do I want to see the game immediately, or do I want to, show a preview, or maybe just a very small tutorial? All right, that's up to you to decide. Is the application interactive and dynamic in nature? That means we are interacting with our data. Your leaderboard could be your data. All right. So think about how. So we are much lesser on the game mechanics, much lesser on the aesthetics of the game. We are more focused on the data and how you deal with all the code. All right, that means how do we sign up? How do we deal with users, changing their profile, checking out the leaderboard? Maybe you can check out statistics. You could even go as far as using data to drive your game. That means changing the game dynamics due to different data. Then I'll talk about it a little bit more. Right, so you are allowed to use any existing games as the base. That means games that you created or the games that we're doing. Right, you're allowed to use any external 3D assets and audio assets. All right, of course, please reference them in your README. All right, so I'm not restricting all this, just to make sure that you reference them. Okay. So here are some things that you can think about. All right, so make sure we are using authentication. So it must be a unique user that's playing. I can sign out and then sign in as a separate user. I must have a leaderboard somewhere. So that's why I will need to compare some form of leaders, some form of players. All right, I can think about interesting stats to display. So just now, that was a simple click and smash game, right? You can change the game dynamics, maybe some form of user experience points after each game, things like that. How many times they play. So all these are your interesting stats you can have. Right, how accurate they are. It could be a mission. It could have different game-based events. So that's up to you to further expand even more. All right, you can make it a time-based game. You make it harder, the time gets shorter, or you can make it as a compete with my top leader stat. Right, so it could have a ghost player, something like that. Also okay, right? Ghost timing stats. All right. Then another simple idea for your game, you could have a simple countdown timer game. So let me just click on it. This is just a web-based game. This is really simple. So like in 5 seconds, how many times I can click on something? So, all right. So in 5 seconds, something like this. Of course, you can ignore the chart. All right. And then you could have a way to tier your players. Then you can have your click per second, or you could even have keyboard commands. What kind of words I'm typing, like typing game. All right. So that's entirely up to you on how you want to. You could have different game variants, right? Or you could have your own games. Right. Make it as simple as possible. I'm very much less focused on the game mechanics. All right. And what kind of game you are creating. All right. So what are some guiding factors? Let me just zoom in. So make it a smooth experience. No bugs, of course. Even if there's bugs, please say which bugs are there. All right. What kind of data to display? That's more important. How do you manage the user profile? All right. Understandable gameplay, with obvious flow, so make it as simple as possible. All right. Make sure you denote the purpose of the application in the README. Any form of wireframes and mockups, please include them. That's going to help. So like from screen to screen, you can just take a snapshot, or you do some form of basic wireframes. Then just put it into the README will do. All right. Then tell me how you are modeling your data. what kind of data I'm storing, why I'm storing in that format, and yeah, how deep I'm storing and things like that. So submission criteria, your JSON export, this one you can export from Firebase. So you go back to your Firebase, and all I do is just click on this, just export JSON. That will do. All right, so that's why you need to have some working data to start with. All right, the next thing is having your Unity package. So just export one Unity package of all the files, scenes, and all that. This is just a very much lighter version of your project files, right? Then your README should be detailed in that sense. What the content you're displaying, application, your wireframes and game flow, right? Attribute all external assets used. If something that's original in assets, please state them also. Then I'll take note, right? Of course, include your demo video gameplay. The easiest way to do the demo, I would suggest just split the screen. All right, one side is showing your Firebase, one side is showing your gameplay in action. Right? Then the last thing to submit is your entire project zip. Right? So usually I'll just look at this file first. If there's a need, I will go and open up your project zip file. All right? The deadline is on week 5, the end of week 5. Right? Please always check all your submission files and the file name and the file extension. Right? Please do not submit the wrong extension. Right? Please make sure your zip files have things. So I have experiences with students, they submit a shortcut to the folder instead of the file. Right? Then I can't open, nothing happens. Right? So this is the breakdown of the scoring system. All technical stuff and how you manage your code, make sure it's well documented, properly organized, and of course, how technical your code is, how you handle your database, and so on. User experience, could be in the form of FX, user interface, audio files, and all that. This is more like a checkpoint. That means if you've done something, there'll be a tick, and you get the appropriate points that's needed. Of course, there are a little bit more points if you've done something extremely well, right? The next thing is how you model your data and authentication. This has to be done properly. That's why the Firebase setup is very critical. Without that, that's going to be a chunk of your grades gone. All right, so make sure you're able to sign up a user, all right, properly, your database, how you model your data is important, the structure of it. Don't make it too complex, all right? Make sure you check in with me on what you're doing, and of course, the video file that is submitted, right? So this is about 10%. Some other things in the rubrics, which is file names, file structure, readability, but this is one of the most important. Make sure you have a way to sign up, a way to log in. So you have screens for that. All right, you could have your start menu. If it starts straight away, then also okay, but a way to say, okay, I'm starting straight away. Maybe 3, 2, 1, that kind of countdown, right? Of course, a game over scene and a way to replay the game. Next thing is critical is the leaderboard, right? I need a way to see, there's multiple users playing. I will just create users, log in the different users and start playing the game, right? Then I'll see your leaderboard is working, all right? And yeah, the code should be robust. Errors are shown. Deadline again, and submit to Google Classroom. All right, and that's about it. Any questions from this class first? Well, of course, ask the other 2 classes. These questions I will announce to everyone. Just want to check. Okay, I'll just pause the recording. Okay, all right for the assignment, roughly know what to do. Right, so please emote on your assignment. Or Esther give a sad face so fast. Many sad faces. Yeah, so that's why the CA is important. With the CA, you can have authentication, so you can start doing your login screen, your sign up screens, the interface. All right, like just now, a basic sign up, that's fine. Okay. Then we can start. You can start doing your game. Either you want to do yourself, or you can start designing your leaderboard already. Okay. All right. Any questions? It's up to you. Because I don't take in the project. Just make sure you export out the appropriate package that I need. That's all. Yeah. So only your assignment, then I take in your entire project. So for CAs, I'm just looking at your scripts, your how you set up, a little bit of your UI if you have. That means like for the CRUD, you might have UI, your scene, right? And your authentication, you might have your scene, right? So I just want to see that happening. Okay. All right, Yishen. Any other?
You know,
Yes.
what to say?
Sorry.
Sorry, what do you say again?
Any other questions? I meant just export the required files that is needed.
Okay.
If there's questions, let me know along the way. I actually don't have anything on already. I would actually like you to try out authentication at least as soon as possible so that your setup is okay. You know, you can do a simple authentication. All right, some other things to take note when you're setting up, right? It could be a rules that's causing errors. Right, just make sure that it's set to public access. Okay, this one, okay. For next week's class, because Friday I on reservist, either you watch recordings that I do on Wednesday, or we could have a class on Tuesday afternoon, 4 to 6. All right. Which one you prefer? I'm trying, not sure whether I can swap classes with Mr. Elias. I'll see how. Any preference from the class? Are you all there? Yeah. I just want to